welcome to Daily Dose Radio, a 5-minute devotional podcast studying the Psalms verse by verse, broadcast from the ever-beautiful Sharonville, Ohio, on the sunny side of Cincinnati. Hey there, friends. Welcome back to Daily Dose Radio here in the Bible Bistro, and today we're going to be looking at verses 9 through 11. Now, we're in the middle of Solomon's prayer, actually. Solomon's prayer began in verse 8 and ends in verse 10. If you go back to 2 Chronicles, let me do that for us while we're thinking about this. You go back to 2 Chronicles chapter 6. We have the dedication of the temple. Solomon blesses the Lord. He blesses the children of Israel, and then he begins this prayer. In verse 12 of 2 Chronicles chapter 6. He stood before the altar of the Lord in the presence of all the congregation of Israel, spread forth his hands, for Solomon had made a brazen scaffold, 5 cubits long, 5 cubits broad, 3 cubits high. And so he's on this scaffolding, and he begins, O Lord God of Israel, there is no God like thee in heaven nor in earth. So that's verse 14. And he continues this prayer all the way down to the end of the chapter, which is verse 42. Now, in verses 41 and 42, we have these verses that we have in Psalm 132 quoted. Now, he says there in verse 41, Now therefore arise, O Lord, into thy resting place, thou in the ark of thy strength. Let thy priests, O Lord God, be clothed with salvation. Let thy saints rejoice in goodness. O Lord, turn not away thy face from thine anointed. Remember the mercies of David thy servant. So we have all of that. Well, it's a little bit different here in the psalm, but the majority of it is exactly like that here in verses 8 through 10, Psalm 132. So, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Was it Solomon's prayer that came first or the psalm that came first? Did Solomon write the psalm and then, doing so for the dedication of the temple, and then he says, hey, I like that, and he takes that with him to pray when he prays and blesses the people and blesses the building? Well, we don't know, do we? Someone else could have written it for him, and then this became a fragment that developed into a psalm. Somebody said, "Hey, that's good stuff. Let me have that. I'm going to write a psalm about that for the dedication of the temple." However it happened, Solomon is using that material in his prayer, but we also find it here in Psalm 132. Now, if you look at verse 11, we have something different. The Lord hath sworn in truth unto David, he will not turn from it. Of the fruit of thy body I will set upon thy throne. So here's the messianic promise to the house of David. We find that in 2 Samuel chapter 7. If you look at verses 12, 14, 15, 16, you'll have 13. All from 12 to 16, you have this whole thing about God's promise to David. He would raise up from his loins a servant, a seed, to sit upon his throne, but it would be his eternal throne. It wouldn't just be a temporary throne. So this is about Messiah. It's about Christ. And this promise that God makes to David here in 2 Samuel chapter 7 now comes over here into the psalm, and so the psalmist is remembering. And that could be the how this was written. This is all a remembering. So we remember the words that David spoke. We remember the prayer that Solomon prayed. We remember the promise that was made to David. All of this is bringing all of these pieces together because we're moving up to the temple, and we want to make sure that we're, headed in the right direction with the right heart and so forth. So he's remembering now the promise made to David about Messiah, that he was going to be on the throne. It's going to be an eternal throne that he sits upon. Now, tomorrow we're going to look at verses 12 through 14, and we're going to go back to 2 Chronicles chapter 6, and we're going to remember some more about that prayer that Solomon prayed, because we have a little bit of it quoted here in Psalm 132, verses 12 through 14. And then we're going to end the week by hearing the Lord speak. So we've heard the psalmist speaking, but now we're going to hear the Lord speak at the end of the week. Join me again tomorrow, and we'll jump right into verse 12 on Daily Dose Radio. Thanks for listening to Daily Dose Radio. I'm David Smith. The music today has been performed by the Bluegrass Experiment. Thanks again for listening. I'll see you next time on Daily Dose Radio.